Today, we are going to try and tackle something massive, the story of India. I mean, really think about that. How do you even begin to capture a history that spans millennia? You've got countless empires, revolutionary ideas, and the lives of now over 1 billion people. It's a huge question. Where do you possibly start? Well, maybe the best way is to think of it like a giant tapestry. You look for the individual threads, the threads of philosophy, of empire, of art, and of freedom. And today, we're going to trace some of those threads to see how they all come together to create the incredible, complex pattern that is India. So let's get into it. We have to start our story with the oldest threads, right? The ones that go way, way back into prehistory. We're talking ancient civilizations and brand new ideas that would literally change the world. First off, the name itself has a story. It all kicks off with a river, the mighty Indus River, or Sindhu in the local tongue. Now, for their neighbors, the Persians, that S sound often became an H, so they called the land Hindustan, the land of the rivers. And then the ancient Greeks heard that word, adapted it, and it eventually became India. So the very name is a map of ancient geography and cultures bumping into each other. So around the 6th century BC, there's this huge spiritual shakeup happening. The old religious order is being challenged, and out of all this questioning, two major new threads appear. On one hand, you have Jainism, which taught a path of really extreme self-denial. The whole idea was to achieve release from this cycle of rebirth through hardcore asceticism and ahimsa, a total, complete refusal to harm any living thing. But then, in contrast, you have this young prince Siddhartha Gautama. He actually tried that extreme path and decided, you know what? This isn't it. Instead, he taught what he called the middle way, Buddhism. He basically argued that real enlightenment is found by avoiding the extremes of both a super luxurious life and painful self-torture. Okay, so now we get to see how these brand new philosophies get woven into the fabric of the first great empires. This is where we see this vibrant pattern of political power and incredible cultural creativity really start to take shape. This timeline here kind of sets the stage. You've got these new philosophies bubbling up. Then, in 326 BC, Alexander the Great shows up, and his invasion completely shakes up the political scene. All that chaos created a power vacuum, an opening for the first massive Indian empire, the Mauryas. And their most famous ruler, Ashoka, is about to take the throne, setting the stage for the classical golden age of the Guptas. Now, the most famous Mauryan emperor, Ashoka, started out as a pretty ruthless conqueror. But after one particularly brutal war, he was supposedly so overcome with remorse that he did something pretty much unheard of for a powerful ruler. He just renounced violence altogether. He converted to Buddhism and decided to dedicate the rest of his reign to peace and taking care of his people. What's so amazing about Ashoka is that he left us his thoughts, literally carved into stone pillars and rocks all across his empire. In this one, he's talking about religious tolerance, a truly radical idea for his time. He says, a man must not do reverence to his own sect or disparage that of another. Concord is meritorious. He's basically saying, hey, let's all try to get along. Fast forward a few centuries, and the Gupta dynasty kicks off what many people call India's classical age. This was just a period of unbelievable stability and invention. The great Hindu epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, were finally written down. You had breathtaking art being created, like the frescoes in the Ajanta caves, and scholars are making these incredible leaps in math and science. They were developing concepts like the number zero and the decimal system we all use today. All right, now a dramatic new color gets thrown into the tapestry. A series of invasions from Central Asia leads to the rise of the Mughal Empire. This was a period that started with violent conquest, but would end up producing some of the most stunning art and architecture India has ever seen. The greatest of the Mughal emperors was a man named Akbar. And just like Ashoka before him, he was a military genius, but he was also a really deep thinker. He was fascinated by religion. He would hold these famous debates, inviting scholars from all different faiths to his court. His big dream was to unite his incredibly diverse empire, not just with laws, but spiritually. He even tried to create a new, blended religion that took elements from Islam, Hinduism, and other beliefs. The sheer wealth of the Mughal court was just legendary, and nothing symbolized it more than the peacock throne.
It was commissioned by Akbar's grandson, Shah Jahan, and it was this opulent masterpiece just dripping with gold and covered in some of the most famous jewels in the world. It was a very clear, very shiny statement of imperial power.
And Shah Jahan, he funneled all that incredible wealth into architecture, creating buildings that honestly still take your breath away today. The most famous one, of course, is the Taj Mahal. But it wasn't a palace or a fort, it was a tomb, an impossibly beautiful monument made of pure white marble built to honor his favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal, after she died. But, no golden age lasts forever. The magnificent Mughal tapestry, it was stretched to its absolute limit, and it started to fray. Internal divisions and a new power arriving from across the sea were about to change India forever. This is the voice of Shah Jahan's son, Aurangzeb, writing as he was dying. He was a devout and very rigid Muslim, and he completely reversed Akbar's policies of tolerance. He pushed away his Hindu subjects and spent his entire long reign fighting constant wars. The very piety that he thought was his greatest strength ended up fracturing the very empire his ancestors had worked so hard to build. And into this power vacuum steps the British East India Company. Look, the legacy of British rule is incredibly complex and still fiercely debated. On one side of the ledger, they did bring things like railways, and they helped end horrible practices like sati, which was the ritual suicide of widows. But, and this is a huge but, these things came at an immense cost. Those railways were primarily built to extract wealth from the country, local industries were destroyed to get rid of competition for British goods, and British economic policies led to horrific famines that killed millions of people. But out of all that pain and subjugation, a brand new thread started to emerge: nationalism. And drawing on its most ancient philosophies, India began to weave its own future, one defined by the struggle for freedom. At the very heart of this new movement was Mahatma Gandhi. He came up with a totally new kind of revolution. His weapons weren't guns, they were ideas. First, ahimsa, that ancient principle of nonviolence. Then, satyagraha, which you could translate as truth force, a determined but always peaceful civil disobedience. And finally, swadeshi, a call for economic self-reliance, which was famously symbolized by the simple spinning wheel. And this quote, right here, gets to the core of what made his approach so powerful. For Gandhi, you could not separate politics from spirituality. He's saying that actions like fasting weren't just political stunts. For him, they were essential tools for strengthening himself on the inside. He was fighting a spiritual war just as much as he was fighting a political one. So, from the ancient Indus Valley all the way to the modern information age, the story of India has always been one of absorption, of blending, of reinvention. Its great tapestry, rich with thousands of years of history, is still not finished. And I guess the big question for the 21st century is, what new patterns, what new threads are being woven into it right now?